All right. Okay. So I think we're live, and this is Animbreak episode 09, and I think this is going to be a fun one. We got first time we got two guests at one time here, and like I said yesterday in my post, it's all about GDC. I want to talk about GDC. It's coming up March 19th, I believe, right? Monday, March 19th. Yep. And hey, Nikita in chat. Did we sound okay, Nikita?
Nikita,
so yeah, we're going to be talking to. Let me introduce these people. This is we have Lana Bachynski, who's an animator at Blizzard, and we have Mike Jungbluth, a senior animator at BioWare, and both these two are involved with basically organizing the Bootcamp and the Animation Exchange at GDC this year. Mike has been doing it since day one. I remember I went to the very first one. Was it 6 years ago or something like that?
Yeah, that would have been 6 years ago. I remember you're in that. Like, we've got that dinner pic of people.
Yeah. It's that was a long time ago. But yeah. I haven't had a chance to go back. But this year I'm actually going again, and looking forward to it. But we're definitely going to get into all that, and kind of like before before we kind of get into, this is Animbreak, and this is we talk about breaking in stories and stuff like that. I definitely want to hear from Lana and Mike about that. But as always, we take viewer questions at the end, and for people that are interested and want to maybe ask Mike or Lana any questions, GDC or other related, I think just pop them in the comments, and we'll try to get to them. So let's just start it off. Lana, tell me your breaking in story.
Oh my goodness. My breaking in story, I don't know how far back to go really, because when you sort of look at it on paper, it's like, well, I got an internship at Blizzard, and then I graduated, and now I have a job at Blizzard. So it's pretty straightforward. I've been working at Blizzard for 4 years, but before that, I was in Edmonton, Alberta, and I was very, very fortunate to go to an arts junior high and high school. So I started studying art when I was 12, really, and before that, just because of my parents. And I started studying animation specifically when I was 15, grade 10, 10th grade.
Wow.
Out there. And so going to school there, I didn't really think anything of it. I just loved it. We used Cinema 4D, and I would be in the lab constantly. I'd show up at 5 a.m. as soon as they opened the school building doors to start doing maintenance and stuff. I would sit there and I'd wait, and I would do flip books, and we'd get books from Goodwill, and we'd chop them up, and then you'd have a nice flip book page from these old novels, and you'd draw flip books on each of the pages and do little animations that way. But I was there early, and I was there at lunch, and I would babysit the teachers' kids while they went and got coffee so I could stay there after school. And I just loved it. And finally, my teacher pulled me aside, and he had posters of popular video games, and he got posters of Pixar movies, DreamWorks films, and he pointed at me. He's like, "Do you see that poster over there?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you see that poster over there?" I go, "Yeah." "Don't know what you're getting at, bud." But he goes, "People get paid to make those." And I was like, "Oh, that could be my job."
And this was still in high school.
That was still high school. Yeah.
Wow.
I think he said that when I was 17.
Wow.
And then I worked really hard, and I sort of learned I did simple rigs. I did this owl rig where it could open its wings and all the feathers would splay, and just trying to understand how different things, setting a driver versus in the driven, and creating chains and rigs and animating. And I had applied for a scholarship, a Teletoon scholarship and I don't even know if Teletoon's still a thing, but it's a Canadian television station. And I almost won that scholarship, but I ended up getting scholarships through the Victoria Foundation for the Arts, did my research, and I applied to a bunch of different schools and ended up choosing the Academy of Art University in San Francisco because of its proximity to studios.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't sure if the school was going to be good. It freaked me out because I had open enrollment, which was this seems like the place that people go so they can tell their parents they got into university when they didn't have to do anything. But their philosophy is you don't need to be good at science and math in high school to be an incredible artist, which is nice, but also they want your money. So good. And so I went to school, and while I was going to school, it was such a struggle because they didn't explain things very well. They were sort of, my first year pulled up in Maya, like, this is the graph editor. It is the single most important tool you'll ever use. And then they closed it, and I never saw it again for 2 years or something like that.
Nice.
But as far as like when I started feeling like I was breaking into something was going to certain events like Bay Area Women in Film and Media and like Women in Animation events and all these little things. But I started a club while I was in university, and that was what sort of changed my life and my skill set and into being the developer that I am now. Was starting this community for people to come to when they have questions, and you see freshmen coming in, and I was maybe my junior year, people would show up with questions, and having to learn how to teach somebody what I just feel like I knew intrinsically started changing my skill set. And then people were like, well, how do I get jobs? And I'm like, I don't know, you apply for them. Like, how do I apply for them? I'm like, well, maybe I should start applying for them. And so I started applying for various internships. I think I applied for 30 internships or something like that. And one of them was Blizzard. And I sort of applied on a whim. My friend sent it to me, and I was like, right, yeah, okay, Blizzard. I love Blizzard. That's sort of why I started. I like had flashbacks to watching the first WoW cinematic and being like, that's the most amazing thing ever. I don't know what that means, but I want it in my life. And as I applied, I was like, cool. And then I forgot about it. And then it was months later, 3 months later, I think it was, and that they finally reached out to me and said, hey, we'd like you to do a test for the StarCraft team. And I opened up the email, and I was like, what? I don't know what I'm reading here. And somebody was sitting at my desk, like talking to me, asking me some question about something. And I was like, okay. You need to stop now. And then I reread it. And like, I got work to do. I only have 7 days, and I have to make a rig and animate these 6 things. And I like skipped all my classes, and my teachers were like, well, that's your prerogative if you want to skip. I'm like, this is for a real life thing.
Yeah.
And I submitted my test, and it was another month or something before they got back to me. And they were like, we're going to schedule a phone interview, which was crazy, incredible. And also, I realize now what a monumental idiot I am. And I am like I am barely employed. This job interview, they told me later, like, I remember them saying, blah, blah, blah. So we do things like, how did you rig this character? And I was like, psych, I didn't. I did a skin wrap to Norman. And they didn't know who Norman was, so I thought it was really impressive. But she did the system. And they're like, that's great. Thanks for your honesty. So here, how comfortable are you with 3D Studio Max? And I was like, why? They're like, well, we use 3D Studio Max here. And I went, really? Like, condescended to my future employers, having no experience, like no idea of anything. I was such a little shit, and it was not good. And later down the line, I heard that they were choosing between me and one other person who had dramatically more experience. The animation quality was roughly similar. There's all these little factors they're thinking of. They were leaning more towards the other guy. And the only reason I got the job is because the guy who hired me made a really embarrassing joke to the guy before me in the interview right before mine. And
oh, really?
He was too embarrassed. Could not look him in the eye, hired me instead. So that's life, yeah.
That's pretty funny. Did you ever find out, I guess, there's got to be a ton of competition for the Blizzard internship, right? Just like hundreds and hundreds.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say like how many people applied, but it was in the thousands of people who applied for the internship.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, I bet. One thing I kind of wanted to touch that you said earlier was because you're Canadian, and I think it's really interesting that you went to like a kind of art-centric junior high and high school. The fact that you went to junior high in Canada is which I never went to junior high in Canada, but I guess in Alberta must be a thing. But
what did you go to middle school?
No, we just went to elementary all the way to grade 8.
To grade 9. Oh, grade 8. Yeah. Ontario.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how Canadians say grade 8 instead of 8th grade, but
I think so, yeah.
So, but like, did you just, is that because you had, like, that was something that either your parents or yourself pursued, or were you just like, hey, there's an art school that's close to me, so that's where I'm going, kind of thing?
My parents are very artistic. They're both artists. My father didn't pursue art as a career, but my parents met on stage. They were the main stage actor and actress for the Windsor Light Opera for I don't know how many years. But my mother played Roxy Hart in the Canadian premiere of Chicago.
That's awesome.
And yeah, they met in musicals. And so my childhood was, my dad pursued law in the end and was like, business, papa. But art was always an important part of my life, like a staple. My mom would go to work and she was an actress, and then she had hip replacements. So then she was a director at a theater in Calgary where I grew up. And I just grew up in this theater. I remember just running dangerously on the backs of all the seats, like ninja style, like on the backs where you sit, running up and down these seats and hanging out with actors. And my mom put me through acting. I did like Dairy Queen commercials and acting and art and drawing. My mom's also a painter. They're both singer-songwriters. And so when I discovered computers, though, I love them, and I would play video games until I died if I could. And so I always think that animation is kind of my love of acting with my love of computers combined. Yeah,
no, that's like perfect fit, it feels like.
But when Victoria School of the Arts arrived, we moved to Edmonton, and when we got there, we realized there's an art school, and art was so important in my parents' lives that they said, hey, you have the opportunity. You can choose. These are the schools that we say you can go to, but this art school is an opportunity we would have killed for when we were younger, and that was the choice I made.
That's cool. That's a nice. That's just nice overall. Nice to have supporters of that, and also like be able to have access to. That's really cool. So you mentioned you got a scholarship to a school, but you didn't end up actually going to that one. You picked going to Academy of Art, or?
I got an art scholarship. I got a generic, here's a scholarship, go to school, here's your money.
Oh, I see. You could use that anywhere.
Mm-hmm. So I did use my scholarship. I applied at Sheridan, and I had gotten into Sheridan, but in like the drawing program and not the animation program, because I guess they overfill and they use this other one as like a seed to the other class. But I looked at that and I said, okay, this is a 2-year program with a possibility of transfer, no guarantee that I would get into the animation program. What's that? How long is the animation program there? 4 years, maybe 5? That's maybe 7 years of schooling. Like the animation is going to be, like the animation industry is going to be a completely different, sorry, I'm getting a pop-up.
Sorry, that's me.
That's okay. I was like, I'm getting a timer. Shut down. I was like, the industry is going to be a different place in 7 years. Like, what am I learning now? I have to go somewhere where that is going to be less time. And then I also got into Emily Carr and Savannah College of Art and Design and one other place I don't remember now. And I chose AAU because it was like, okay, Pixar's there, DreamWorks there, Ubisoft is there, EA is there, Industrial Light and Magic, Tippett. Like, even if my school sucks, I know that I will have resources available to me to keep me educated enough to have the career I want to have.
Yeah, because growing up in Canada, like, you know, I grew up in central Canada, and then the kind of like what was in front of me was like, you know, either going to Sheridan or Vancouver Film School or, you know, Emily Carr or something like that. But I never once, I don't know why, I never once thought about going to school in the States, because it just felt like there's schools here, so, you know, kind of thing. But so this is really interesting to like hear like Canadians that go to like that actually like know about that in a way. Like, was that did you meet other people like internationally or Canadians that went to Academy of Art, or?
Oh, tons. There's a huge international population of students at that school. A crazy amount of international students. I would almost say that, I forget, they actually gave us percentages at one point because they were so proud of their international program. But like, 50% of the students were not from the States, or at least not from California, which is, it's not that big of a deal to move around one country, but it was still, you'd always know, because on holidays, like American Thanksgiving, you wouldn't have a lot of kids going home. You'd have a bunch, like all the Americans would leave to their families and hang out with their loved ones, and all the international kids would be like, karaoke in the lobby. And then there's so many of us in like a crazy party. So there's certainly lots of us who made that choice. Some made it because of proximity. A lot of people made it just to get away from their families. Everybody's got different reasons for wanting to leave their hometown. But for me, it was the industry. It was there. I knew it. I knew it.
And so how did you kind of, you had an internship at Blizzard, and how did that kind of transition into an actual,
my job, my real job?
Like, did you leave and then come back, or was it just like at the end of your internship, they were like, hey?
At the end of my internship, I had like an exit interview with my lead at the time. And he was like, you were a great employee. And I was like, great. So you'd work with me again? He was like, absolutely. I go, great. I graduate in a year. Because they wanted me to have a degree because of visa reasons. I need my bachelor's degree in order to work in the state.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I was like, I graduate in a year. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, I'll be applying. And they're like, okay. Like, don't forget about me. They're like, you were loud enough that I think your voice will be ringing through the hallways. I don't think we could forget. But I kept in touch while I was gone. And in the meantime, I met Mike. Really met. It must have been the first year of the GDC. So my internship was in 2012, that summer. And then the animation bootcamp started March 2013. And I was like dramatically more confident than I've ever been. This is going to be my 8th GDC, I think. So I was volunteering at GDC for a long time, but I sort of went back to school, and having an internship and getting hands-on experience really does, like, even just the 3 months gives you so much insight into how to focus the rest of your education on what you're doing. So it's like, okay, I understand that these things were not important. So maybe these are not the classes I'm focusing about. I maybe don't need an A in my science fiction and fantasy studies class. Right. And just finding what was important to me and realizing the skills I want to practice. Okay, communication skills. I want to practice working collaboratively with people more often, and I want to practice the polish on my animations. And when the bootcamp started, it was, to me, monumentally important. Sitting there and going to GDC so often and meeting tons of animators and feeling like, man, there's a lot of us here, but there'd be like the occasional art talk that was like, ooh, Art of Diablo, cool. But they're not just talking animation. It's like, okay, it's cool, and I'm feeling inspired, but not really enriched, deeply enriched in this community. And having that first year start up and this flood of animators and everybody who sort of tangentially touches my part of the pipeline was not only just insanely inspiring, but just eye-opening by way of networking and communications and getting an eye into different parts of the industry. Indie, motion capture, what are the other people prioritizing? These things were sort of few and far between to me, and then suddenly this influx of it, knowing who to follow on various social medias, and then it just exponentially grew in my understanding of the games industry and what I wanted from it and where I fit in. And so taking the skills I'd learned from my internship, we had the bootcamp, which was like, amazing, this is the best. And then there's the animation roundtables, which Tim Borelli runs. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't go because I had a shift. And so I swapped shifts and I was working the door. And I threatened the other CAs who were outside. I was like, I'm standing inside this door because you have to post somebody outside and somebody inside. I'm standing inside. Don't take this from me. And I stood inside the door, and Tim was like, let's talk about the principles and like how they apply to game animation, because it's not the same as film animation. And like, how do we identify as animators for this medium? And because all of the things I'd learned and like cutting short, like where's anticipation in a video game, are things I was so thinking about so much when I was an intern. like the room was kind of quiet. I don't think people really understood like what the round table was, and neither did I. But eventually I was like, can I speak? I like talking. And like, I know I'm working here, but I have thoughts in my brain, too many of them. And that was kind of it. I had this incredible conversation, felt like I was welcomed into this community, even though I was sitting there like in a uniform of like, hey, look at me, I'm very, very fresh at this. And meeting those guys and finally like having the guts to go up and talk to them and being like, this was wonderful, thank you so much for doing this for the community and for me personally. And then seeing them later at like a party, and my friend embarrassingly like forcing me to hang out with them, which is no regrets, but it was tough at the time. I just talked about this with Tim and Simon's show, so I don't want to like spoil that story, but I'm an embarrassing individual. And then seeing them and talking with them genuinely gave me the confidence to be like, I can do this, because I had conversations with you and you weren't like, leave, child, you are stupid. You were like, interesting point. Here's something to consider. And having those conversations on a level that felt respectful and respected, just, it changed my life. And so I went to go apply for Blizzard again, and they were like, something has happened and you must wait a year. And I was like, but I'd rather not wait a year. They're like, you must though. And so I waited. I did freelance illustration like for a little company in San Francisco for a year. And eventually I got a text message at 9 p.m. one night. I was like working out, and my former boss texted me like, yo. And I was like, yo, dog. And he goes, how do you feel about moving back to Orange County? And then I cried. And then I said, if I had a good enough reason, I guess I would, because I can't quit the sass. He goes, we've got an official offer in the mail, yay! And a couple months later, I was working with him.
That's cool. That's cool. So, you're able to, as a international student, you're able to kind of hang around after you graduated, and
they do. It's called optical practical training, and if you are in a STEM career path, which is I think science, technology, engineering, mathematics, you can do optical practical training, which is a year and a half, I forget, after you graduate to work and try and find a company to sponsor you for a full visa. And then because I'm Canadian, and there's the NAFTA, I'm on a TN visa, which is not an H-1B, which is the tough one to get. And the TN is a temporary visa that lasts for 3 years at a time and is no intent to stay. I can get into the jargon of it. But being a Canadian working in the States, fairly easy as far as international work regulations go. So, and Blizzard's very nice, and they take care of all that for me. And they're like, just go, leave, and come back. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I was on a TN visa for many years, and it's a little stressful because it's like it's infinite as far as I know, like in terms of renewal, but you have to renew it every year. So every year was always a fun time with the border cops. I probably went to like almost every single border entry.
Really?
Like Detroit, Windsor, Vancouver, Seattle, Central Park. It was
I have a long-winded story about the most condescending person I think I've ever met, where at one point I had a photocopy of my bachelor's degree, and he goes, but you have the original bachelor's degree? And I go, no, I've got that copy there that's in this large stack of documents with it. And he goes, you expect me to give you a visa with a copy of your degree? And I go, and he like found this binder. He goes, what does it say here? And I read it, and it was like, applicant must show proof that they graduated a thing. And then I read it, and I go, He goes, no, read it out loud. So I was like, okay, like applicant must show. And then he goes, And I go, not to be argumentative, but it doesn't say provide original copies. And he was like, go sit down. He was so mad. It was not a great time.
Oh man, it's always a trip. I'm sure everyone has, I gotta. But that's a good kind of like loop of the story to kind of like, there's Mike,
Yeah.
meeting Mike on the and I guess that could segue to like to Mike, where it's like I think you've made a big impression on a lot of people coming up, especially in the last however many years. People have learned a lot of things. I have, it's been awesome to see all this stuff. So let's start with the origin story though.
Sure.
How'd you break it?
So I went to. Well, originally I wanted to do comic books, and I got accepted. There's a school in Jersey called the Joe Kubert School, which is it's essentially just like taught by comic artists, right? Joe Kubert was like this really well-known comic artist that did like Marvel and DC stuff, and so he started the school. I got in there. I didn't have the money to go there, so took a year off between high school and college, and there was a state school in Pennsylvania where I grew up. It was about an hour away. And they had an animation program. And I said, all right, sweet. Well, animation is like comic books, but they just move, right? I'm still having to learn about good posing and storytelling and framing of shots and sort of all of that stuff. So I can go get this animation degree and then still be able to do comic books afterwards, right? And so went to school as a 4-year program, and it was a bachelor's. So but we'd have all the stuff, math and science and music, all the courses that you need to take. So the first year was just like drawing and like fundamental stuff. Didn't even touch animation. So then the sophomore year, had my first animation course, and I was like, this is pretty sweet seeing these characters move as opposed to just individual static things in a frame that people just flip by. And so I really got into it. And while I was there, I met Jaleel Sajul, who is active in a lot of the same stuff. And we got to be really close, along with a few other guys, and we just kind of always kept pushing ourselves. And when I graduated, I was like, well, all I'd ever done was 2D stuff in college. I had like one course of 3D. I think I've posted that somewhere before. It's absolutely miserable. I show that as a look, this is what I graduated with, and somebody still hired me. But oh man, it's just miserable on every conceivable level that you could think of. So at that point, this would have been, I don't know, like 2004, I guess, 2003, 2004, something like that, when I graduated. And there wasn't really much 2D jobs at that point. Like all the Disney guys that had been let go were like saturating the market and obviously way better than I was straight out of school. So I was like, well, I'll do some comic book stuff. So I did indie comic stuff for about a year, and it wasn't taken off, right? And so at that point, Jaleel had moved out to LA, and he'd gotten an apprenticeship at Rhythm and Hues. And he was like, hey, come on out here. He's like, I'll teach you just the basics of Maya, just to animate Maya. You don't need to learn how to rig or model or lighting, any of that crap. He's like, there's only like 5 buttons you need to worry about in Maya. Come out here. I will show you those 5 buttons, and I'll get you an apprenticeship at Rhythm Views for whatever the next project is or whatever. So I proposed to my then girlfriend, now wife, and I said, I promise that when you graduate from college in 6 months, I'll have a job and we'll be able to actually survive in LA together. And so I moved out there, and for about a month, I would work during the day, and then Jaleel would come back and he would say, okay, this is the stuff I learned today at Rhythm. These are the things you need to be putting into your tests, right? Into your just acting pieces, right? And it was like, this one 11-second club was like huge. So it was like that thing, take an audio line and do an acting piece to it, right? So for like a month, it would be go to work, come back, work on that. He'd rip it apart. We do it again. And by the end of the month, I had like 3 tests, right? And it was a total of maybe like 20 seconds of animation of that. And he was like, okay, cool. There's going to be a apprenticeship coming up for Garfield 2. And we're gonna get you that apprenticeship, right? So he takes my stuff in. They end up not doing an apprenticeship to Garfield 2. And I was like, oh man, like this is getting like down to the wire now. It's been a couple months. Working Radio Shack isn't going to cut it for when they get married. something needs to happen. And one of the guys he worked with had an old college friend who was starting up a game studio. And so his friend was like, hey, I'm the art director, but I need an animator. And so he asked, any animators? He's like, hey, I think I know somebody. Comes back to me and says, do you know Max? And I said, no. He's like, all right, well, we're going to tell him that you do. You have the weekend to learn Max, right? You need to find those 5 buttons that you know in Maya, put them together in Max, and do some sort of little test over this weekend to show that you can add that to your reel to be like, look, he also knows Max, right? So there was one other guy that we knew from college that was out there doing something. He knew Max. So I went to his place for a couple hours. He showed me what was up. I was like, okay, sweet. Go back, spend that weekend making some, I'm sure what's got awful. I don't even think I have any more of a dude running and jumping or something, right? And put that together with 3 Acme pieces, give that to him. He gives it to his buddy. I get a call that day, and he's like, hey, do you want to meet up for an interview? You were recommended by so-and-so or whatever. And yeah, sure, cool. Go have the interview. I'm like, okay, it's cool. It's me talking to a guy randomly in Starbucks. And it's about, I don't even know if he said what he was working on at the time. He said it's going to be a movie game for the PSP. And that we'd have about a year development cycle for it. And that what they had was really pretty rough. So he's like, you think you could do it? And I was like, oh, sure. I got this, no problem, right? They ended up offering me the job. The first month, I think, was work from home. So it didn't feel real at all. I had no idea what I was doing. And I get in, into the space. And it was hardcore crash course. The art director who hired me, he knew a little bit about animation, but a lot of it was pretty basic and how to get it into the game. We were using Biped. They'd hired somebody that had done another guy that was really fresh out of school to do all the character art. And he would rig them up in Biped because I didn't even know how to rig, right? And a lot of it was just learning on the job, right? Hey, we need jump animation now. So you make the big mistake of, all right, I know how to do a jump, and they squat down and do the anticipation and then jump, and you're like, oh, this looks great, and you put it in game, and you press the button when you're about to jump off a cliff, and then you realize you just slide right off the cliff as your character's still squatted, and you're just squatting to your death. So I did that for a year. At some point, they'd hired another animator who actually had some experience, and he ended up doing all the player stuff, and I did all of the enemy stuff and all the NPC stuff in that game. But LA really wasn't where my wife and I grew up. A lot more from rural Pennsylvania. LA wasn't really our style. So took a job in Austin at this place, Edge of Reality, and I worked on another comic book movie game. Sorry, the first one was 300. So then I worked on another comic book movie game for the Incredible Hulk, the Ed Norton one. Did that for about a year, and being northern folk, Austin was too hot. And so took a job up at Raven in Madison, Wisconsin. And I'd say that was kind of the first time that a lot of stuff really started to click. As a quick backtrack, it was at Edge of Reality that I met Ryan Duffin, who he and I and another guy, Rick Blankenship, we started a podcast called Reanimators. That's right. And it was one of those things where podcasts had just sort of started, and we were listening to them, but there was one animation podcast, and it was Clay Cadis's animation podcast, right, when he was at Disney. And we were like, oh, there's no even game podcasts. There's nothing here. And we were kind of in a bit of a creative slump at that point in the project, because it was it had a lot of crunch, and we needed something to sort of reinvigorate us. So we started the Reanimators podcast, and we sort of used that as an excuse just to find people at the studio that were still excited about stuff creatively, and then we would start calling people in that he had worked with previously at other studios. So I went up to Raven, and we continued doing the podcast. And at Raven, I worked on Wolfenstein and Singularity and Call of Duty Black Ops. And it was kind of also at that point where getting about 4 or 5 years into the industry, and you start going, well, I feel like I should be considered a senior now because, that's what happens at like 4 or 5 years, right? You assume that you're a senior. And so I was like, well, what does senior even mean, right? And I was like, well, it's somebody who's really good at a thing, right? Like when I look at the seniors here at Raven or at other places, it was always like, if I have a question, I know that this person is sort of the expert on that thing, right? And so I was looking around at Raven and I was like, well, I know like that person over there is a senior and they're really good at like sort of the more technical stuff, like how do you get in the game, how do you troubleshoot it, like how do you sort of make all that stuff sort of work and come together that way. There's somebody over there that's just like an all-star animator. Like you give them that thing, they're just gonna like blow it out of the water with just like how like talented that they are at the craft, right? And how skilled they are at the craft. And so I kind of saw this gap where there wasn't as much somebody that was as focused on sort of the design side of things, right? Like how does the animation of this character fit the sort of performance of the character in game? What does this interaction ability, what does this say about the character? Sort of all of that sort of side of stuff, right? And I was like, I'm going to get really focused on that, right? That's the stuff that I'm really kind of interested in. And I think if I can sort of push myself in that direction, then it makes a good case as to why I should be senior, because I'm filling a gap that doesn't already exist.
Yeah.
So I started to really get into that, and I started doing blogging on Gama Sutra about that stuff, trying to just understand and like take like animation principles that I knew and sort of use that as a lens to engage with game design. And then started blogging on the site called Alt Dev Blog a Day. That was mostly, it was pretty much all programmers, and there was like me as a non-programmer. And then Tim Borelli came on through that, and Simon Unger, which is how we met Simon, came in through that. And at that point, Raven had sent me to my first GDC, and that would have been probably a good 2 or 3 years before the bootcamp started. And I loved it, but I was like, there just isn't a whole lot of animation talks. I think there was like one animation talk, and it was Bruno from Sony Santa Monica doing a God of War 3 talk. That was great. I want more of that. So I ended up leaving Raven and going out to work at Monolith in Seattle. And they had sent me up to go to SIGGRAPH. And I went to SIGGRAPH and talking to, like going to all those talks, I was like, yeah, this stuff is cool. But again, like there's no game animation focused stuff. And somebody like was holding a panel that was sort of supposed to be running their game sort of things. And they were like, hey, we want a discussion. What type of things would you like to see more of at SIGGRAPH? And I was like, I want to see more game animation stuff, right? Stuff that's focused on sort of that weird in between, like, is it design? Is it animation? Who sort of brings up to life these characters, AI, all that sort of stuff. And they're like, that sounds really cool. Do you want to do a talk about that? And I was like, no, I'm saying I want to learn people who are doing this because I want to get better at it, right? And so it was kind of one of those things. And at that point where I ended up then, after Monolith, going out to ZeniMax Online to work on Elder Scrolls Online. And working out there, it felt like at this point now I'd kind of done like the tour of a lot of the more like studios on the outskirts, because we weren't really into the big city stuff. And still maintaining the podcast with Duffin and talking to different people at different studios. And we got pretty good too of like, if somebody was doing something cool, we would just message them and say, hey, we do this podcast. Do you want to talk to us about stuff? So we started to get a little bit more comfortable about just randomly asking people to talk about stuff, which ends up becoming a pretty good thing to be able to do. And so while at ZeniMax, I was starting to feel like I was stagnating a little bit. Like technology-wise, MMOs are kind of always like generation behind what everyone else is sort of doing, just by sort of the nature of the game itself, right? Like having to have that characters on screen and, dealing with like server client stuff and just all of those reasons. So I think it was like an E3 or something. And it was like this annual thing that would happen where you would have somebody like David Cage would get up on stage in E3 to talk about his next game and say, the future of game animation is this. And it was like, here's an actor that we put markers on, and now look how more realistic things look, the future of game animation. And you'd get a bunch of salty animators on Twitter going, this guy doesn't know game animation. Like, why is he advocating for what game animation is? It was kind of one of those points where it was like, all right, we keep complaining a lot that, you have these people that they're selling their thing, right? I don't fault them for trying to sell the thing they're making, right? And if we don't like that being the thing that's sort of promoting what we're doing, we should be doing that. And seeing that gap had existed at both GDC and SIGGRAPH, but being way more interested in sort of the energy of GDC as a whole, I hit up people like sort of that sort of group that I've mentioned now, right? Like Tim and Ryan and Simon and Jaleel. And then, was like, let's start, like, GDC has these things, like these summits. I don't know how they start, but let's figure it out, right? Like, let's do an animation summit. That sounds powerful and awesome. And so I just randomly message somebody at GDC. It might have been Megan Scavio. Hey, there's a bunch of us, we've got this whole written out, prepared thing of myself and people who've worked on like Halo and Assassin's Creed and all these things, right? Like, validate us, give us this thing. And they said, well, summits only happen, they have to be organized by GDC advisors, and none of you are on the GDC advisory board. But we have these things called boot camps that are one-day events where essentially you have one day, you program it to be whatever you want. And we said, sweet, let's do that. So we organized that, and that was people I mentioned. It was also Jonathan Cooper, who was anim director at Assassin's Creed 3 at the time, and Amy Drobeck-Jones, who I'd worked with at Monolith, and Ed Hooks, right? Because he had also come out to Monolith, and he was one of those. There was kind of a point where you had a lot of film people sort of going around to game studios talking about animation as a whole, and a lot of it was very like film focused. It was very clear that they were super knowledgeable about that, but that was where they were interested and excited. And when it came to the game side, they didn't spend a lot of time thinking about that because it wasn't in their wheelhouse, right? It wasn't even in their vision. But Ed was one of those that you could tell was like really excited about what games offered as far as performances, right? And the player versus the creator and sort of all of that stuff. So yeah, that was the first boot camp, right? Which I know I'm starting to, but all this stuff's kind of interconnected for everything. So I was at ZeniMax for 3 years, and we'd done a couple boot camps at that point. And so then the next year after that first boot camp was really successful, and we had people like Lana come up and like go, yeah, this was great, this was amazing, we need more of it. It was like, all right, we got to do this again. So that next year I wanted 2 days. And so I opened up admissions, and I was like, if I can show them we have 2 days worth of content, there's no way they can say no, right? Like, here's just 2 fantastic days full of things. So we got 2 days worth of stuff, and we put that in the submission, and they say, this is great, but it's really only, like, we can only support 1 day, right? Like, there are other boot camps on the other days. We don't have the ability to support another 2-day event. So it has to be 1 day. At which point I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll pick the talks that are best for boot camp, and then will you accept all of these others to the main conference? And they were like, yeah, I mean, they're great talks. Let's do it. So that was pretty cool in that we had a full boot camp, and then the rest of the week, like Wednesday through Friday at GDC, there was a couple good animation talks like every day. right, on top of Tim's roundtables. And so that sort of became like the thing, right, where every year I wanted 2 years because it was like there's no shortage of awesome people, and it's been so long since there hadn't really been a place or a platform for people to, like animators, to actually sit there and talk about specifically how they're doing stuff in games that like everyone was wanting to talk about, right? And it became like an exciting thing for me to find people who were doing things that were really cool that maybe people didn't know as much about. Like David Rosen doing his procedural talk, that like floored everybody that second year because he was like, I made an entire game with like 12 poses and it's like fully animating, and everyone's like, and then it's cool because a couple years later you start to see the thing he's talking about showing up in other games, and he used similar ideas in Agents of Mayhem, and Overwatch used it, and it's you know, it's cool seeing that stuff. But so I've been doing that for a couple of years and not being able to get 2 days, and also sort of like hitting a peak at ZeniMax, where after a couple of years of seeing all these people showing off all this cool stuff, I wanted to start playing with some of it. I ended up moving to Volition, where I became lead animator there for 3 years, and was great because then I kind of got thrown right into, okay, do you know how to do state graphs and or like node graph stuff in state machines? And I was like, I've never done it before, but I've talked to enough people that have, and I think I can get into it pretty quick. And it was great. I loved working at Volition. I loved working on Agents of Mayhem. That's like such a personal game to me for all the characters that I got to work on and help create, and the team that I got to grow there. And then last year, I guess it would have been a couple of years ago, and I think Lana was here at that point. We would always the Sunday before, like Bootcamp is always that first Monday of GDC, and that Sunday before, for the last 3 or 4 years now, I had a friend at Twitch who would let us go to their offices to do prep that night. And it was one night, and I was like, man, I am getting so frustrated that I only have 1 day to do, like, to show this, because there's so much stuff that people want to talk about. And it's also frustrating that the schedule is so, like, GC has their schedule, right? They've got multiple talks across multiple disciplines. Like, they need to have their stuff that you can only have a talk here because somebody's going to want to see that and then go to another one somewhere else. And so, like, it's, you have to fit within their dictated schedule, which makes sense for the giant conference. But for me, who's programming essentially my own mini conference within that, I was like, I want more. And my buddy was like, well, if what you're trying to do is get a lot of information out there to people, and you're looking for a pretty open and free platform to do that, hello, that's what Twitch does, right? So let's talk. And so we were talking for a while, and then finally last year, it all came together in the Animation Exchange, which was essentially like the day 2 that I'd always wanted, except it was like without any restrictions, right? Essentially, Twitch said, here is 8 hours. Just show up, bring whoever you want, have them talk about whatever they want, and we'll do it in our office, our equipment. We've got our own tech people that are going to run all this thing, and that's yours. Do with it as you please. And it was great. I loved it. So at that point, it was like, all right, well, we've got the boot camp, and now we've got the Animation Exchange. And I about killed myself trying to organize both last year. And I was like, but at that point now, Lana had run 2 micro talks at GDC. And it was obvious, like, she had her shit together and was able to, like, sort of cat herd a bunch of different speakers and find people and get them to sort of say exactly what needed to be said, right? And finding the right people to talk at the right times. And I was like, it's a no-brainer. She's been here since the first one. She's seen it from, like, somebody that was attending and what they wanted from it and what it meant to them to now being on the stage. And it's a perfect time for her to take over the boot camp, and then I can focus on the Animation Exchange and sort of try and figure out that that sort of new space, right? Because it's the same thing, but it's got a few different possibilities, and certain things that work on a stage don't work on a screen and stuff like that. So now we've been playing this one, and then just because I like to make my life more difficult, at the same time that we've been planning this, we just moved up now, and I left Volition to work now at Bioware. So I've been there for a full week, and so that's sort of the whole trajectory. Right?
Just a quick international move in the middle of the conference. It's nothing.
It's literally been like the last 3 years. I think it was like 1 year I was closing on buying our first house and planning GDC and going to that. And then last year it was like we had to lock down Agents of Mayhem, and I was organizing the Bootcamp and the Exchange, and I was giving a main conference talk about Agents of Mayhem. And then this year was like, oh, all I'm doing is the Exchange and not even a talk? Yeah, let's also move to Canada and start a whole new thing. But it's good, right? Like all this stuff, for me, it's all entertaining. It's Lana, when you said starting that sort of that your tea time right back in school, your animation group, kind of was like that thing that kicked it off for you. I feel like that was a lot of the same way when I was at school, since it was this small sort of isolated state school. There was an animation, I can't remember the name of it now. Man, I'm terrible, right? But it was an animation group, right? That we could, essentially you could get funding from the student government, and then you could bring in speakers. I was like, well, if we don't have like tons of people here, we've got a free budget that all we have to do is show that this thing is valid, right? And then that gave us the opportunity to find people from Pixar and from Marvel and from DNA and from sort of all over to come in and talk to us. And I think that was also helpful in that having to get comfortable in organizing and running a team, like a student organization that way, and dealing with like the student body government politics stuff and sort of like all of that stuff, and then just being comfortable randomly calling like Pixar and being like, hey, can you send someone here? All of that stuff, you can like, I look back, I'm like, yeah, that definitely helped me, so that when somebody's like, hey, we should start a conference, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And it just seems like a thing, right?
I think that's part of the reason why the bootcamp, I joked before we went live that like I don't really feel like I broke in until like I met you guys, like that first boot camp, because starting Tea Time, which I don't even think I mentioned, like when I mentioned I was started a club earlier, it's Tea Time Animation. It's like my side gig. We're doing some 6 things for the Animation Exchange this year I'm really excited about. But that was something I did because I feel like I couldn't help myself. I'm like, okay, I'm not getting what I need. How do I get what I need? And it's like, oh, are you getting what you need? How do we get you what you need? And then figuring that out and putting things together and calling people and making sure, like just organizing those things. I feel like it was so important to me. And that just felt like something I did because I needed it for me. And then going to GDC and this boot camp starting, it was like, this is tea time. This is what I've been doing. This is what I've been wanting. This is everything to me. And I'm seeing it here from these professionals. And it just felt like I am on the right track.
Yep.
That conversation, I remember the animation exchange is so funny and such a marvel to me, because it was you, me, and Mose. Is that how you say that?
No, that would have been Aaron.
Oh, it wasn't him. Yeah, your buddy.
Later, yeah.
But it was like us, and we went to go like pull a pint from the other room or something like that. And you're like, it's so annoying. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's crazy that you've wanted to be a summit. 2 days would be so much better. And you're like, right, 2 days would be so much better. And sitting there and your buddy being like, he was very mild. He was like, dog, we got space here and like the internet. And I feel like I saw just flames behind your eyes. And you were like, right, yeah, okay. And I just see like all these gears start like turning. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. But my brain was like, I have so much to do. I can't think about that right now. And then months later, you're like, it's happening. And I was like, I knew it. I saw he's doing it again. The fire, it was amazing. And it's so wonderful that you've done this. It's very great.
Yeah, it's, I mean, just seeing it from afar, you know, just like from year one to, I guess, what is it, year 7 now? 6?
Yeah.
6.
This is 6, yeah.
6, yeah. It's amazing, man. It's just like, I think a lot of people, kind of like when you were saying like, like I want to hear from this person. Like, well, you want to do the talking? Like, no, I want to hear from these people. You know, it's like, I think that's the general consensus of a lot of, you know, that first year I went to the boot camp and then I went to the main conference and there's like a couple of animation talks and you just kind of like make time to check those out, but to see kind of what it's to grown into. I think it'd be a good time. Well, I shared the screen with her, kind of showing last year's micro talks. This is micro talks, right?
Yep.
And let's kind of transition into like kind of questions. So if anybody in the comments, you know, has questions for Lana or Mike, whether the GD's related or otherwise, pop them up. They have a lot of you know, experience and advice they can kind of dish out. So there is a question here, but I want to ask my own question first, which is you know, from year 1 to now, okay, what's kind of been what's the goal of this year for you guys? Like when you guys get together and you're like, hey, let's do something for the next year. Is there something that you guys want to index on this year?
Yeah, so I'm interested in hearing Lana's answer because, like for me, one of the things I was excited about was I think it's easy to sort of, I think when you watch all 5 years of the animation bootcamp, I think you can see probably my personal bias as to what game animation should be about come through. So for me, it was always like, what is that? Like, it isn't just animators, it's animation programmers, and it's technical animators, and it's technical artists, and it's game designers, and it's AI. It's like, it's all of us, right? And so it was definitely trying to grow that, but I was definitely, my approach was generally I'll start with that traditional talk that all the animators normally want, right? Like, let me bring in Jaleel when he was at DreamWorks, or, you know, let me get somebody that's going to hit on that, like, the sort of like, I don't want to say feel good, but like that traditional animation stuff that people get like super geeked out about, right? And that was my hope, to be like, I'm going to hit them with this and they're going to be like, oh yeah, this is what I love about animation. And then throughout the day, sort of keep layering in. Now this is how you take that enthusiasm and apply it to programming and design. And so by the time like you get to the last talk, it might not even be what you would necessarily first think about as animation, but animators need to understand that so that they can apply everything they know about bringing a character to life and the performance and putting it on the stage. So for me, it was kind of always that thing of like, I'm tired. I don't want people to just say, well, I'm an animator. All I want to do is animate and kick it over the fence to somebody else to figure out how to put it in game. That's not even a conversation that like I think will entertain anymore. And I think that's sort of been like the thing that I've noticed at like the roundtables is it's much less, well, should animators even do this? Now the conversation is like, how do animators do this and where's the limit of what animators should be doing, right? So that's sort of been, I think, what my goal has always been, and sort of probably what you start to see at like the exchange and stuff like that. But that was like the old and busted, right? Like now we've got the new vision, and so I'm excited to hear about that.
When Mike first asked me to do this, I was like, okay, those are the largest shoes to fill. I don't know. You know, had a mild identity crisis, but we're good. And I started thinking about exactly what you said. Like, what was I thinking and feeling when why did this impact me the way that it did from the first? And it was seeing a reflection of what I was doing and validation in that way, where I'm like, yes, I'm on the right track. I know I am. And thinking on a more on a broader scale, which is perspective that the micro talks brought me, where it's like, okay, I'm not talking to students. I'm talking to developers. I'm talking to seasoned developers. I'm talking to technically minded people, and I'm talking to artistically minded people. I'm talking to this incredible spectrum of individuals who come together as part of this community. And how do I make sure that this feels worth their time? So my goal with this year was something for everyone. So, animation is not just animation. It's not sitting at a computer and kicking things over a fence. That, I think, is so important. That's like half of what this community is about. It's like, oh, you're going to this thing so you can meet people and have conversations, and then you can learn how to talk to people and be comfortable coming back to your own office and talking to people there too. And so I tried to just create a very, very well-rounded picture of what is animation in the industry now. It is indie, it is AAA, it is 2D, it is forced perspective, it is 3D, it is pixel art, it is technical importance, it is engineering that supports the ideas, and trying to get all of that in there. And it is those soft skills, it's talking. And so we have talks this year that we've got Kyle Bunk doing talking about pixel animation. We have Camilo. I don't know how to say people's last names. I've never spoken them. So if they watch this, I'm so sorry. Camilo Vanegas, Vanegas, and he's talking about his work at Supergiant Games on Pyre specifically, which is going to be, I'm so excited. Then we have Shadow of Mordor, Camille Chu, and John Peel talking about a very similar sort of setup, I think, to the Naughty Dog talk from last year, where it's like artistically and technically, how do we get these things together? We have a panel with animation engineers and technical animators. We have our gameplay engineers and technical animators, and we have the art, like hardcore art, beautiful Richard Aud talking about Horizon Zero Dawn. You're pulling up the schedule. Thank you so much.
Yes,
I'm just trying to remember. And then a talk I'm very excited about animation leadership and what it means, like that's the soft skill set side of it. Like your career doesn't end at your technical capabilities. Your career permeates through everything you are when you are interacting with your colleagues. And then we're, ending the day with this 3 years running tradition, Tricks of the Trade, which is like hot take tips and tricks on like, this is how you can improve your workflow and your life as an animator now. And then the animation micro talks, which doesn't speak to the process of animation so much as the culture of animation and the games industry and what that means and people's sort of personal experiences with that. And that's where we're at with the day is something for everyone and a glimpse at everything that we can.
You forgot one.
I forgot one. What did I forget though? I'm looking.
The Anim Tech panel.
I didn't. I said it.
Animation's not the answer?
I didn't say the name of it, but I said it.
Oh,
animation. I said animation engineers, gameplay engineers, and technical animators. It's called Animation Isn't the Answer, and it's real edgy title. And check it out. Mike Jungbluth is the moderator for this sick panel coming up, and it's going to be A++.
Right there.
Got the
See, now you sold it. You brought it up now there.
If you want, I could do the radio host. Elevator pitch for each of the talks, but that's
you click on the links and then you're there.
Yeah, it's good.
Is there a challenge forgetting about with the GDC side of it, like challenge kind of like what's the biggest challenge of kind of getting all these people to kind of talk about the things that they that you want them to talk about? Like, has that ever been a hurdle for you guys, like as far as studios and all that stuff like that?
Studios is a bit of it where we had a different talk slated. I was very excited. I won't throw anybody under the bus and say who it was, but studios being like, last second we're recalling nobody's talking at GDC. We just decided that now, and they take it all back. So studios got to do what studios got to do. In some of the cases, the animation micro talks is tough to get people to talk. Where it's like, hey, don't talk about your work. Talk about yourself and your insecurities. And that is. Getting these talks where people are being more vulnerable in a way, it's difficult to sort of convince people that they are worth that and they have things that people want to hear them say. Yeah. But usually I think people are pretty eager. Like all these people like, do you want to do this thing? And they're like, absolutely. And that's sort of the end of the conversation.
Or they'll even like, you know, during the week of GDC, you start already creating your list of what the next one's going to be, because there's people that have approached you that said, hey, my game is coming out next year. I've got something cool I want to talk about. Add me to your list, right? Or we'll be at the roundtables. I don't know how many times at the end of a roundtable, somebody will say, hey, I'm this person at this place, and they'll say something that's really smart. And then I like leap over the tables at the end of it to like try and grab them and say, hey, I run this thing. You want to talk next year? You have a card or something, some way that I can bother you again in like 8 months. And so that's usually, I mean, there's usually always 1 or 2 talks that you sort of get planned, and then life, work, studio, whatever, something happens that they're not able to do it. So then you always kind of in the back of your head, okay, what are my backups, right? Like you always have like 3 or 4 sort of like either go-to people or go-to talks that you know will be good, but maybe just didn't quite get in, that you can always sort of like, okay, sweet, let's go with this, and we can pivot and be reactive to that. But it's usually not that, like, that's the thing that kills me. I'm still always amazed this didn't happen sooner, and amazed when people say like, you know, like, oh, this is such a big thing that you've done. So like, it isn't that hard, right? Like, it's, hey, let me look across the industry. Who are people that are doing really cool stuff? And let me give them an opportunity to have a spotlight shine on them to say, show everyone the cool stuff you're doing. And in a lot of times, right, like, you know, especially now that we've got this great community, people like are excited because like, oh yeah, I've seen for the past couple of years people talking about this stuff, and I wanted to meet this person, and you know, you start to get these relationships that come from it, and now you've had numbers of success stories where, you know, somebody you know, gets to work with one of these other people and they get really excited about it, or if they're laid off, then now they've got an entire network of like other animators that are like, here, go here, let me set you up with this person, right? And so like it's great. I mean, the whole point of this has been, instead of having everyone trying to come up with the same answer to the same problems, let's get that information out there so that we can sort of keep lifting each other up. Because you know, my biggest thing with all of this is that, you know, you look at film and it's no longer how do we get these characters moving around on the screen that they're asking. It's what do we do with them on the screen? What's the performance? What's the thing we're trying to tell? What's the emotions that we're trying to convey and elicit? And that's what I want, you know, in games. That's what the whole point of this has been, is if you know how to do this thing, show somebody else so that I can see what they're doing with it, right? And that's kind of been the other big thing that I keep trying to work in to these, is that as animators become more capable of doing things, let's make sure that the things that they're making and the things they're trying to say can have some substance to it, and that they're comfortable speaking about that stuff, so that when opportunities arise, you're either completely taken back because you've had no time to think about what you want to say, or you're too afraid to be able to say something, or just unaware of what could even be said, right? So,
I think just for anybody listening, your microtalk was a bit about that and talking about the knowledge sharing. And it's like, it's 5 minutes and 32 seconds. If you haven't checked out Mike's microtalk from last year, I love those points. I love the idea of going beyond and not everybody answering the same question over and over and over again in different ways. Like we can work together. We can do this as a community and an industry. It's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so we went over the Bootcamp side. Mike, you want to kind of talk a little bit about the Anim Exchange list I got up here?
Yeah, so it's definitely kind of a mix of traditional talks and then kind of trying to play into the strength of Twitch, right? So, you know, we start out the day, we've got the guys from Ubisoft Milan who worked on Mario Rabbids, which, man, the animation that gave like so much personality and character dripping from every one of those characters. I'm excited to be able to have them come out and do a talk about their process. Then we've got the Animation Showdown, which is kind of the most bananas idea, and that's you guys are involved. So,
oh my gosh,
you indulged one of my crazier ideas, which was let's have you, Jason, and David Gibson, and Jaleel sit down and animate live. But I feel like people have seen that before, so let's throw in some sort of twist and kind of put you guys on the spot so that it becomes less about make a pretty animation, and I think it becomes more of an entertaining thing of how do you sort of roll with the punches and how you still get to see some process, but I think it becomes a little bit crazier. But I think it'll also be great that at the end of this thing, there won't be like this beautiful finished animation. And I think not enough people share that stuff, right? So I'm excited about that. And I know Jake and Lana, they'll be hosting it, and their brains have been going to places.
I'm laughing because we were just talking the other day, and in talking about this with Jake, I don't think I've laughed harder in months. It is. We got to talk, Jason.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god. What do you guys got planned?
This is also sort of like broken me because now, like for the panel that I'll be moderating at the bootcamp, all of my suggestions have just been like, what if we make it like we're wrestlers? And you come in like to your own pyrotechnics and then like, pull it back. That's not really.
My buddy Cody was like, so I got to talk to you about an email I got. I was just pitched like an exorbitant role play scenario.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Which is, I think one of the other reasons that it's good that there's like this break so I can just sort of go nuts with this stuff. Right. Oh, I just tried scrolling your screen, Jason. That doesn't work. So one of the talks I really liked last year at the exchange was Lana and Jay Hosfeld from Epic and Alex Lehman from Riot, and they were kind of each talking about their process on working on MOBAs. And I really liked that. So first-person games seemed like another perfect way of sort of having that same sort of approach. So we've got Esther from High Res and James Benson from Campo Santo, and then Duffin, because, like I said, he's been with me since the beginning of this stuff. He's at DICE, and then Zach Lowry from Boss Key, sort of all talking about their approach and showing different things that they do. Future of game animation is one that I'm super excited about. This is one where over the last few years, you've really started to see some crazy new tech with like the motion matching stuff, the neural networks, and machine learning, all this stuff that is coming faster than people think, and sort of becoming used even more and more. And so we've got some really awesome people kind of talking about that stuff with Daniel Holden, who's at Ubisoft Montreal. Look him up if you haven't seen it. He has this one where essentially it's taking a bunch of data, mocap data, just raw mocap data, adding it to this neural network, and essentially it then, like with all the deep learning stuff, it's creating animations real time as you move around, right? It's not actually calling, it's nuts. Dan Lowe, who's a senior technical animator at Motive, he's like way into this stuff, which is great. I love talking to him every year about these things, and seeing other, like at the round tables, he'll talk and all the other animators' eyes kind of either go scared or angry that he says computers will take over everything. Lena Halper, she's a senior animation engineer at Epic, and then Tim will be trying to make that in a way that doesn't make everyone watching the stream cry. We've got Keyframe of the Mind, which is another great podcast that's done by Esther at High Res, Julie, Jenny, and Katie, who's at Rockstar. And they talk about like some amazingly honest stuff about the realities of dev, about what excites them, about things that have burnt them out. I can't think of a sort of more honest show that I've listened to before, and so I'm excited for them to be able to do it live. Career development, kind of what Lane was talking about, of what are beyond just your technical skills. What are the things you need to do to sort of continue growing in this field? So we've got John Paul, Ryan Miller, who's at Vicarious, myself, Adriana Pucciano, who's a senior animator at Rockstar, and Tasha Sonar, who's had like one of the best career trajectories I've ever seen. Like, she was an animator at Pixar, and then she went over to Double Fine and was lead animator, and then on Brutal Legend, and then sort of creative director, and she came up with Costume Quest, and then now she's back at Pixar, and she's like associate creative director of theme parks and all their interactive stuff, which is cool. Then the game that sort of got me into games animation is Mark of Cree, so I'm geeking out quite a bit that we've got Eric Medina doing a talk. We did a flashback last year about Spider-Man 2, and I love seeing sort of these benchmark games, at least in my mind, of like where game animation sort of like leveled up a bit, right? And you kind of see like these touchstones that people go back to. So for me, Mark of Cree is a good one. Technical Animators Workshop, again, how many times have tech artists or technical animators saved you guys' lives?
Was that an actual question? All the time?
Yeah, all the time. So we get to see a bunch of them. Brian at Avalanche, Isabella at Survios, Lee at Creative Assembly, as well as Mike, and then Rich Katz over there at Blizzard. They're going to be going through, they've sourced some questions online. If you have questions that you want to, that you've always kind of wanted to ask a technical artist, if there's a bug, if there's something that freaks you out about something with Maya or Max or Mobu or anything like that, they've got a Reddit post where you can put those questions out there. But they're going to be showing off like sort of tools that speed up workflows, things that have sort of been aha moments to them, and showing a lot of it live, which is cool. Then as we start to wrap up today, we've got Dan, who's at Another Realm. He's going to be doing a talk about Injustice 2, their performance capture stuff, all their character stuff, especially with cinematics, was just like, even websites, like game websites that never talk about animation, like the animation in this is great. So it's like, well, of course you're going to be doing a talk for us. And then we wrap it up like we did last year with Gwen, pulling in a random number of awesome people. I think this year it's like Christian Janjuk, who's animation director at Lucid, Jay Hosfeld at Epic, Amudina Soria, who's at Naughty Dog, and I think David Gibson will be back again as well. And she has a mix of just random videos that she chooses to have them react to live, as well as what's really exciting this year is that, we're doing an animation jam, but it's going to be run by Tea Time. Lana's.
It is. I'm very, very excited about it, and Tea Time is super excited about it. It is March. Should I just plug it right now?
Yeah, plug it.
Yeah.
All right, so we are doing an animation jam and just announced it on the interweb yesterday. It is on the weekend, the 48 hours before GDC. So the Saturday and Sunday, March 17th and 18th. We're having an animation jam. Registration is on the Tea Time Animation website. I should probably put it in a more prominent spot, but there it is. Fabulous. Amazing. So March 17th and 18th, Tea Time, we're hosting the animation jam with a theme of weapon of choice. So you can compete as an individual or in a team of up to 4 people, and people have 48 hours before to complete this animation suite and submit. Submission details will be released between March 14th and 17th, along with information so that we know you haven't just been animating from now until then and like, oh, yeah, that was no time. And we're going to have some sick prizes, I believe. And the TBA on those. And it's going to be great. We're hoping to have pockets of people competing. There is the Tea Time HQ animation team, or several teams are going to be in San Francisco. We're going to have some of my Tea Time staff members, Fernando Penafiel, I hope I said his last name right, is going to join us. He's heading that up on behalf of my student board, and it's going to be great. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah.
Register today.
All right.
I'm really excited. excited. The response so far has been super, super positive. So sign up your teams. March 14th is not too far away. It's like a week away or something. It's 10 days away as of now. So get yourself registered. It's just a Google spreadsheet. There's not like a fee to register or anything. But join us.
I mean, that's the cool thing, right? Like you'll get like all of those people that are going to be doing that live review are amazing, right? And getting the opportunity to have your stuff seen and critiqued is always a great experience in itself, right? And then the other thing that I'm really hoping to foster with this is, the Animation Exchange it's free and it's live and it's available to anyone with an internet connection. But all of this is also about growing a community, right? And I want everyone to be able to watch this, but I would also hope that with this jam, it's giving people the opportunity to find people around them and sort of watch the event together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's you're watching it together in a hangout and you're doing it that way. Obviously, Twitch chat, is allows everyone to comment there, but really trying to just pull in together, not just at the event, but I would love to have animation exchange parties that are happening all over in real time, right? Because as much fun as it is to watch it on your own, watching it with other people that are enthusiastic about it is even better. And if it gets rowdy and you miss something, it's fine because it's recorded and you can go right back to it. As soon as the event's done, it's instantly live, the recording. So I'm excited about that. And then, throughout the day, we've also got a bunch of interviews between talks. So a bunch of other awesome people that will just kind of come in, and it's kind of the quick, I'd say 5-minute version of your animation break, Jason. Right?
Right, exactly.
But how'd you get doing this, and why do you do it, right?
Yeah.
So it should be fun and nuts, and yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, no, it's I didn't stress that enough when we first talked about it. I was like, yes, the Animation Exchange on Tuesday is even though it's part of GDC week, it's free. It's just you just watch it live and or record it, but live is always nice to kind of see what's going on. So I think that's
your opportunity, I think, to, like, last year we sent out we had a big feedback form and we got quite a few responses, but if you're not seeing something that you have questions about and you're like Googling away and you're talking to your buds and you want more of something that's not there, like, this is your opportunity to ask for that thing. Like, the chat is live. We're reading it. We have moderators reading it to make sure that we're jotting down questions. Last year, if somebody had a talk and your question didn't get answered, the people who were just part of the previous talk would jump in to the chat and answer some questions in chat for a couple minutes after, just to make sure that everybody was really getting what they needed out of this. And I think it's a really good opportunity. If you can't make it out to San Francisco or don't want to make it out to San Francisco, which is a popular opinion and totally valid, it's awesome. It is so much fun.
Yeah. And what we're doing this year is any of the talks that were sort of more like traditional talk, where they're just going to be presenting a bunch of information that aren't really conducive to allowing for answering of questions that come up in chat during the talk. Those ones right after, either myself or Tim will be sitting down with the presenter, and that's when we'll be gathering all of those questions that came up during Twitch chat and asking it, right? It's when we do like a panel that's really all about sort of engaging with the chat and giving that opportunity to answering those questions throughout. It's after those that we'll be doing the interviews with other people. So trying to making sure that we're more involved with the chat this year has been a large something we're really aiming for.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's a good rundown. Definitely looking forward to it, and I think this is another kind we're already talking about and everything. Do you guys feel like taking some of the viewer questions? There's a bunch that kind of came in on the comments.
We
can
sure.
hit some of those.
Mm-hmm.
So
great segue.
Yeah, I'll go with some of these are GDC related, some of these are not. We're just kind of pulling basically whatever comes out, which is this one's from Nikita Taranduk, I think is pronounced, and he said, "I'll post this question here. With all the experience you guys have acquired over the years in the animation industry, is there any advice you would give to your younger self? Is there anything you would do different?" And I mean, either one of you could take it. Up to you.
I think for me, the difference would be to more quickly learn the difference between being humble and being self-deprecating. I think it was Gwen shook me out of it. I had like a crazy bout of imposter syndrome last year. I don't know why that happened when it did, but there's like a drive that challenges you to always be better. And like that realization of, yes, I can always be better. I accept feedback, those are core values. Every voice matters, and understanding like, yeah, if somebody has a thought on what I've done, I would accept it because I accept that I'm not perfect and my work is absolutely not perfect and I can always be better. Nothing is ever finished. Somebody takes it away from you and that's it. But when I was getting, I was getting really down about it for some reason. I was feeling really whack. I wasn't really stoked on my microtalk from last year. And then Mike, I think you asked me Sunday night to take over the boot camp. And I was like, I worked so hard for this moment. And like feeling like weird and emotional about it, like remembering so much, still feeling like that student. And then my like being humble about what I'm doing, what I'm working on started verging into like, I'm just got here. Like, I don't know what do I have to offer? And just sort of realizing like you do have something to offer because you have unique experiences. And even if somebody's had them, you have a different perspective on it. And even if not, maybe it's a good reminder. And finding that sort of like not being a jerk to yourself, I think that took me a while I'm still working on it. But that would be my most relevant piece of advice now.
That's great.
Probably get more technical more quickly. I think because I came from 2D, I've done the whole like, well, I'm doing 2D, so computer animation, computers are evil, right? And then it was like, all right, get over yourself. Like, learn how to animate in the computer, and you're going to find a job, and good. And then it was like, yeah, well, fine, I'll do that, but mocap is evil, right? And so I was like anti-mocap for a while. And then it was eventually like, well, just use it, figure out the best work flows for you, and it's probably going to make your life better. And it does, right? And so this is, I think it took me getting over those two and kind of seeing the benefits that can come from it once I embrace it, as opposed to trying to push it off or just hand right up in the screen for as long as I did. I imagine I would be even better at that, and I'd probably have been more willing to get into things like more rigging and scripting and things like that I'm still woefully behind. Like when you say you just did a skin wrap to Norman, right? Like I'm so technically deficient when it comes to like DCC stuff, and so I'm definitely feel like I'm doing better now and trying to fully embrace all of the fun technical stuff because it just speeds things up and allows me to do more things with the characters and animations I want to do. But yeah, I think I took too long for that. And I think that's probably why my bias is when people say that stuff now, or like with the conference trying to like smack people out of that and like embrace all this stuff more is probably because of that. I feel like I'm on the couch now and you just like pulled something from me, Jason.
We'll thank Nikita for that one. But
yeah,
those are both great. Like I can totally relate to both of those, to be honest. So
it's a hard balance too, right? Because like animation itself is such a like there's so many things that you're already balancing just as an animator, right? Like principles and then just general physicality and acting and all of that stuff. And now it's like, now also learn technical stuff, and now also learn how to communicate better, and also learn like it's hard, right? Like this stuff does sort of take time, right? You can't just expect that you're going to learn all of it right out the gate and that you're the best at it right out the gate. So it's kind of one of those things where it's getting what you're saying, Lana, like balancing that. Okay, what am I confident in? And I'm allowed to be confident in that, but what am I not confident in? And that is the thing that I need to be honest with myself, that I don't know that. Put that confidence aside and just try and be a sponge to all the people that do.
I think that just being open to learning. Something I don't even want to talk about this because I'll just say my whole microtalk right here if I end up like going down this rabbit hole. But this is like exactly what my whole microtalk is about this year. Is about that like self-deprecation versus whatever. My microtalk was, and the theme kind of came from a bunch of different places, but one of them was seeing the feedback from the microtalks this last year and being like, well, I'm a garbage person and I should just die. And then I went back because I wanted to reference some of the quotes from people. And then there's like a paragraph of feedback and there's only 2 sort of negative things. And in my brain, it was 100. It was all just people tearing it apart and thinking it was horrible. But it was like, no, it was actually great. And it was totally fine. And people liked it. And only 2 people were like, not what I was expecting. But then that was like, okay, reality check for myself. Calm down, girl. Like, you don't have to be perfection. You are not. And then also the reality check of, but these people, the thing they're upset about, they just don't want to learn something new. They're not even open to the idea that there could be value in this thing, even though it wasn't what they were expecting it to be. Like, that made me so mad. And so the idea that somebody would just outright reject something and being like, you know, mocap is evil. It's like, well, I actually think a lot of people are using it and maybe there's a reason for that. And maybe you should discover what that is.
Yeah, no. It's, all right. So okay, next one. This one's from Karina. And as an animator who's never gone or been able to go to GDC, what do you recommend to hit up first? So it sounds like she'll be there. Basically, all the things to do to get the most out of the convention in regards to networking, talks, getting a job, and have a good time. I plan to go next year, said. I missed the part. Yeah. So did that make sense?
Yeah, it did make sense. I definitely have a lot of thoughts on this. I don't know if you have thoughts, Mike.
No, go ahead.
Obviously, the GDC Animation Bootcamp, Monday, March 19th, would be the best thing. I guess next year. I don't know when it'll be, but probably Monday. But the bootcamp's great because if you're an animator, which I think she mentioned she was, everybody's in one spot, and it's like that's like the community. Everybody's bustling and hype and getting excited about each other, and you'll have like a lot of great conversations. You'll meet so many people. It's great for networking. But then the sort of rule of thumb to getting the most out of the conference is prioritizing things that aren't recorded, because you can always watch things that are recorded later. So if somebody's like, interesting opportunity, let us go get a beer and or food and have this conversation. You're like, but there was a talk I wanted to hear. Like, that's the opportunity. You go for the beer.
Yep.
And when it comes to networking opportunities outside of it, like, I guess there's lots of things happening. I'm talking like this is when I get back into like my student CA brain. I'm like, there's so many parties. Why would you pay for that one? There's some that are free, you know? And just don't be an asshole and don't shove your reel in everybody's face. Go there for the conversations and the people you will meet, because that's what's going to be more important to you than being like, did you like my reel? Will you look at it? Give me feedback. Because if you make a connection, you can ask for that later. Make the connections.
Yeah. That's the thing. I had somebody I worked with once, like, I don't really understand why go to GDC unless it's like, hey, look at my work and here, look at my work. And I was like, that's because that's what everyone does all week. Like, they're out there to find out, like, oh, you like pancakes too? I like pancakes. Let's go get pancakes. And then you enjoy pancakes together. And then, like, in 2 weeks, you randomly say, hey, I'm the pancake person. I had a question about this thing. And it's like, yeah, I love pancakes too. And whatever, right? Like, that's, more pancakes, less other stuff. I mean, that stuff's gonna naturally kind of come up because it is so many like-minded people focused on that stuff. But I think that's the big difference between like networking and just going and talking. And I'm like, honestly, some of it too is like, I'm bad at small talk, which is, I think, one of the other reasons I started the boot camp and the podcast, is because, like, if I have to go up to somebody to say, hey, how's the weather? Like, that's my small talk. But if I can skip past that and just be like, hey, I run this thing, do you want to talk here? Or, oh, I really liked this thing that you talked about here, or something along those lines, then I sort of cut past that stuff. But hopefully, you get to pancakes at some point.
Nice.
But the other thing is, as far as, I would say, we've got the Anim State Discord. That's really great right now. You're going to meet a lot of people on there. It's a lot of us that run the boot camps and the exchange and Anim State, and all the people on Twitter. But then also a lot of other people, right? And it's growing, and there's a lot of great people on there, and a lot of great conversations that I even saw, like, for the jam that's happening. Like, teams are getting formed up in there. of people who want to work together, right? So I think that's kind of a great resource, especially as you're looking to go next year, and that you're going to probably get to know people on there, so that when you do go to the conference and meet up, you're going to hopefully have sort of a tight-knit group. Like all the women that do the Keyframe of the Mind podcast, I don't know how many of them met in person. I think maybe they've all met one, or maybe like once or twice, but they've never all been together in like one location before. It's totally formed from sort of this internet thing, right? And they're going to go out there and just be like besties for like a week, right? And that happened because they, tried to figure out who liked pancakes.
Yeah. The internet is such a wonderful place that you can start cultivating those relationships now. And if I don't know where you are in your career, but if you have like more student oriented questions and you're nervous about that kind of thing, there's a thread for Tea Time specifically, which is dedicated to those junior level questions that if you feel trepidatious about posting that to a wider knowledge base, like there's something for everybody. So join us.
Yeah. Because the first GDC I think is always your worst as well, because for a lot of people it's a family reunion, and so I think that can be hard to sort of like break through maybe the first time, and I think by the end you might have broken through like a little bit, and you see sort of like what's inside the Emerald City at that point. But I think it's a little weird and awkward at first, right? Because like we're gonna go and I'm gonna see, like, between the animation exchange and the boot camp, there are like 50 people that are presenting. And so, my first like 2 or 3 days is just getting to talk to like 50 people. Like, that's a lot of people, right? And so it's like half of my week now is already dedicated to like seeing and catching up with all of them, that I imagine if somebody comes up and talks to me on Monday, that as much as I don't want to probably be dismissive, it's going to happen because I'm going to see somebody that I haven't seen in a year or two, and like run up and give them a big hug, and then it's like, oh, sorry. So I think the first year is always the worst, but it gets better.
It gets better. If I recommend a strange hobby. I feel like the only reason that I was able to be friends with you guys is because I happened to have a yo-yo on me, and they're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Pancakes," and that was my pancakes.
Honestly, I think it was you asked a good question at the round table.
Oh,
I always forget you do it, but I think that was one of those, right? It was, when somebody says something and it's not, it's that mix of like, here's an idea that I have, and I think that it's right, but I'm not sure. Or I'm just trying to contribute to the conversation that isn't in a way that's like, look how great I am. That stuff resonates, at least with me, right? As to, there's somebody there that could be a new voice that I want to continue listening to, right? To see what they're about. So, as I disregard the pancake, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's fine. It's like, well, that's like what all advice things are, right? It's like, it's this thing or it's this thing.
All right, so this one's from Caleb Batty. And in your first animation jobs, what is the most important thing you learned? Also, do you think it is worth spending more time learning rigging? I spend all my time animating, and I'm worried I'll miss out on some job opportunities due to my terrible rigging skills.
Feedback early and feedback often. It is a Post-it I keep on my monitor to this day. You show up, you want to prove yourself, you want to get through like an animation and polish it up and show people like, look at this amazing thing I did. But then you spend all that time making this thing to show how impressive you are and how worth it you are, and you're a great hire. And they're like, you took this really far. It's going to take a while to step back from this. You might have to just start over because it doesn't hit this, it needs this, and you're missing that thing. You're like, And so from the beginning, don't be shy of showing work in progress. It is a collaborative effort. It is not, the weight of the world is not on your shoulders. Feedback early and feedback often. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, I would say as far as like rigging, I would say, focus. If you want to be an animator, right? Focus on being the best that you can be at that. It certainly does not hurt to have some tangential knowledge of rigging, right? Because essentially what that's going to do is, if you know a little bit about rigging or a little bit about how to get your animation into the game, then when something doesn't work right, when you followed the list of how to do this thing, you can spend the next 5 to 15 minutes or whatever trying to troubleshoot the obvious stuff, right? And what that means is then when you have to go talk to an animation programmer or a rigger or a tech artist, you're going to say, hey, I ran into this problem. I checked these things already, right? Because it's like when your internet stops working, right? And you like cycle your router and then you're like, it still isn't working. So you call up the internet provider. And then the first thing you hear on the phone is, did you cycle your router? You're like, of course I know how to do that, right? But it's having that little bit of knowledge at the beginning is going to help speed it up, that when that expert comes in, they don't sort of have to assume that you know that, like, that you missed that simple stuff, and they're not having to just spend their time, which is valuable, doing things that if you had just a little bit of knowledge, you might have been able to pick up and taken care of. So I don't think you can know all the things. Focus on the big thing first, and then if you get a chance, pick up a little bit on the others.
That's good advice. This one's from Niels Dinklar. Says not GDC related, but do you ever feel like that the more you work on an animation, the worse it gets? And how do you stop yourself from breaking your own work?
I don't stop myself from breaking my own work. I delete it. Mm-hmm. If an animation is not going the way I want it to go and I'm hitting my head against a wall, I've worked on it for 2 days, I delete it and I start over again.
Yep. Yeah, you learn so much in what didn't work there that when you start fresh and you don't have all that baggage of stuff that you thought was important and you just get to create the things that actually are important, it's going to speed up. Everything's faster the second time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like stopping myself from breaking my animation. When I'm hitting a wall like that, I typically find that I'm like overthinking it rather than being like, okay, I'm thinking about this by way of physics and anatomy, but this is animation. This is the illusion of life. This is not actual life. How can I do this simpler? How can I take a visual Occam's razor to what we're doing here? And it's like, well, instead of doing these 3 poses, what if I did one big pose and then a smear to this pose? And then we're done. I don't have to figure out what the body's doing because you can't actually see it. You just see, wow, now I'm here. Mm-hmm. Magic.
Yeah. I think, Niels, it always helps to, I think fresh eyes is the key, right? Just stop what you're doing. If you can, take a break, and, the next day, it may all make sense to you, just mm-hmm. looking back at it. So, let's see here. All right. This one's from, I think it's a question for you guys, from Christopher Bernal. As opposed to an annual event like this, have you considered tackling smaller, more frequent events, local meetups or talks hosted by companies and streaming it? I'm sure you guys have.
From Tea Time side, Tea Time does bring in speakers, like smaller events, one-offs, roughly once a month. So on Tea Time's facing side, we definitely do, but I think that is more difficult to get professionals sort of in one spot all the time. Mike can probably speak to that more than I can.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is if you have a thing, right, that you think you'd like to have a professional speak at. I mean, there's multiple ways that can happen, right? If you've got a little bit of a budget, then if it's, hey, can I pay for your plane ride and hotel out? Which if you do this far enough in advance, that's a few $100s, right? Depending on where you're at. And you can get them locally. And a lot of times most professionals will do that, like to schools or something. They'll be like, yeah, I get a free vacation somewhere and I'm going to get to go, hang out and see people excited about stuff. So you can do that. We would do, when we didn't have money that first year at the animation club when I was in school, we would call professionals. We'd say, hey, can we give you a call, put you on speakerphone for like an hour and just ask you questions that way, right? Now it could we Skype you in, Zoom you in, Google Hangout, whatever, right? There's so many ways to get in touch with people that way. We are trying to, now that like with the Animation Exchange becoming this sort of entirely digital platform, it is something that I'm hoping to try and sort of figure out, like what is a way to maybe make that happen more regularly? Like, how does all that stuff sort of happen? And for me, a lot of it too is organizing a big conference like this. Where is the, I want to make sure that we're not getting to a point where we're either repeating ourselves or the well's running dry because we're doing talks all the time.
People need time to develop what they want to talk about.
Right. So, I think there's lots of ways to get people to talk to any group that you're a part of. You don't always have to go to them, and they don't always have to come directly physically to you.
And it's also like an opportunity for you. Like if this is something you want to see more often, you're like, oh, I really wish that we could have talks from this, or I really wish I could hear from that one person. Tea Time exists because I wanted to hear from that one person. And just really getting the wherewithal to email people. I've never gotten an email being asked to speak and been like, this is repugnant, I am annoyed. I'm like, me? Shut up. Like, so like flattering to get that kind of email. So if that's the kind of thing you want to do, it could be an opportunity for you to flex those skills and learn those. Again, the soft skills is the corporate word I heard for it, but learning how to talk to people and learning how to ask for what you want and plan an event, like that's an opportunity for you.
Yeah, you can even just like organize, like, there's tons of talks, animations talks that are on the GDC Vault. There's the Animation Exchange. It's entirely possible you could just take a group of people and say, hey, let's start out to get people excited about this stuff. Let's watch one of these talks together as a group and then talk about it afterwards, right? You've got a whole list of years now of anything on the Vault that's more than 3 years old is free. Right, so I think up to 2015 now of the animation bootcamp is free. So the first 3 years, that's nuts. Go wild with it, right? That's a bunch of talks that you could start already right now watching together.
And just as another shameless plug, like Tea Time, like if you are wanting to build a community and you want to see more than that, Tea Time does weekly meetings. I have like starter kits ready to go. If you want to create your own Tea Time chapter, like we can make this happen. You can be something in and of yourself and also be a part of this larger community. Just hit me up.
Yeah. All right. I lost myself in this thread here. So, here's one from Bemin Jackson. When you're in the industry, do you recommend that at some point you stop animating in your spare time so you don't burn out, or not?
I recommend you do. If you're motivated to animate constantly, then animate constantly. You don't have to stop yourself from doing what you're passionate about if that's what you love doing. I recommend work-life balance. I recommend not standing at the computer all the time because you'll physically hurt your body if you keep doing that. But if that's something you want to do, that's totally your prerogative. I just, in my free time, I like discussing animation and planning stuff like this because it gets me hyped to get my work done the next day. But I create different art, that's totally on you though.
Yeah. I think it's like your creative battery better than like anyone else. Nobody else knows what your engine is, right? And so if animating more when you get home is what drives that, because that is sort of what's, everyone sort of has like their inflow and outflow, right? When you're at work, when you're animating, for most people, that's your outflow, right? So you need to find any opportunity you can to ingest new things so that when you push out something, it's something new. It's not derivative. It's not repetitive of what you've done before. So I could see entirely a way where how you ingest new things is by trying to animate something new, and that's what's putting you down a rabbit hole of learning about, whatever random thing you think was necessary for that. Then sure, go for it. Personally, I don't think I've done a personal animation since I've started working. When I get home, I focus on other stuff, reading, watching movies, going out on, out into the world and in nature, like whatever else. And that's what works for me, but it's different.
As an animator, everything sort of informs the way that you would approach motion and approach characters. It takes living life to animate life. If you just spend it doesn't really matter, but like if you're going out and having experiences, you see a character, you're like, oh, this is what I'm going to be animating today. you can find a way to personally identify that and be like, oh, you know, it'd be really cool. I remember this one time that I felt this one way because I was at this one thing. And you can infuse little bits of yourself in all the characters that you create. And that's because you've gone out and given yourself those experiences. So things to keep in mind.
Yeah. That's, all right. Here's one from Caleb Longmire. And it's kind of an interesting one. I think I'm someone who falls right in the middle of animation and programming. I have a very technical mind, but I have an eye for animation. I'm still very new to both animation and programming. Would it be wise to just focus on one side or try and do both?
Well, I've seen Caleb's stuff before. I think you, like, what gets you more excited, right? Like, which is the one that you sort of like initially fall into? I think the fact that you've got sort of a technical brain that can see that stuff, like, that's amazing, right? Like, anytime I come across programmers that can like see that and have like that heart of an animator beating inside their technical chest is like amazing. But it might be that, you know, oh, I'm really into programming now, and you're going to spend like 2 or 3 years focused on programming, and then you kind of get to a point where you're like, oh, now that I know how to do this, it's unlocked this thing where I get more excited and I want to try this thing, but oh, now my animation skills aren't at the same point, so now let me try and level these up to get to the point where I can make this thing that my programming skill hits, right? But I mean, I think it's really about finding which one gets you the most excited out the gate, and then purely pragmatically, programming is going to pay a whole hell of a lot more. I would lean towards that. Because, you know, you've got a lot more opportunities that way. And
I was like on the edge of like, is that the part that it's like worthwhile to say? It's like, well, do you like money? But I'd say you can do all of the things you want to do. You just have to have an understanding of like, if somebody is animate, like I said this as part of my animation exchange talk last year. I had a teacher who said this thing where he goes, it sounds redundant, but it's like, if that's what you do, then that's what you do. So if you're an animator and you're animating all day, every day, and all you're doing is animating, like you are an animator. That's just what you are. But if you're animating all day, then you're also like a barista, then you're an animator, but you're also kind of a barista. And so you can be both of those things. You can be a programmer and an animator, but when it comes to like how quickly you're going to level up those skills, somebody with unwavering focus on one thing is going to level up those skills like, and somebody who is dividing their attention is just going to take like, or theoretically could take double the amount of time to get them both to the spot that is like hireable material. Yeah. So if you want to focus, you know, do you like money? Do you want to make art? Whatever it is you want to do, but split focus will always be more challenging, not impossible, just more challenging. And it's just good to keep that in mind.
All right. Oh no, I lost the thread. All right. Okay. Let's do a couple more. How about that?
Sure.
Niels again asks, my school will be selling our mocap studio because they barely have any students using it. This means I have a few months left to work with it. Any tips I should focus on? It sounds like it's got some hands-on time with some equipment that you don't usually come in contact with. You guys have any advice on that?
I've never done mocap. I did mocap once as a student, and that's it. So.
So what I would do, and I would try and come up with is a library of things that you like. How much more time do you have to school, right? And look at it this way of, okay, I'm probably going to need like, what's sort of that rote stuff that you don't necessarily want to have to start from scratch with every time. So capture a bunch of walk cycles, capture a bunch of runs, capture a bunch of like people sitting down, getting up. All of this stuff can either be used as a base for your characters in games. If you're looking to do shorts, this can be stuff that can populate with characters in the background. And then more than anything, save all that somewhere to the school's network, right? Like, you are building this amazing resource of potential animations. And if you do this, you have two things will happen. One, future students are going to be like, holy crap, that was awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're going to have other people that you're working with over the next year or two in school that are going to be like, holy crap, I needed this thing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This professors are going to see you're doing this thing as an amazing resource for the rest of your school. And they're going to be they're going to be in mind if somebody that they know is looking for somebody for an internship or a job. Hey, here's this person who is thinking about stuff on a bigger level. And then it might also, just by chance, save the space, because now they're seeing how this could be a resource that could be continued to be used, even if students aren't using it all the time, how they could sort of be using it for their own. Because man, like, a mocap space is so valuable. It's sort of that's. And if need be, like, email me somewhere. I'm sure you can find my email online. Somebody's email address, and I'll yell at them as to why it's stupid to get rid of mocap space, because there's absolutely no shortage of things that can be done with such a thing. Even if students are using it, I would say that's as much a failing on the school as it is the student body.
Yeah, and just from I haven't done mocap, but one of my greatest regrets is I had this class once where, school is the opportunity to make all kinds of mistakes, and that should be what you want, because you're not getting paid. There's not a deadline. There's not a budget being affected if you're fucking up or messing up. And so this is your opportunity to learn the program. Think about it technically, not just thinking about it from this place of, oh, I should create these things because these are the animations I want to create. Like, how does this work? What am I looking at? Why is this set up this way? What does this program look like? How be very technically proficient at what it is, because it is a tool in the end. And you should be able to create animation with anything. You should be able to draw a picture and create an animation theoretically, and you should be able to open Maya and hand key an animation. But understanding the tools what it's really, really amazing for is just having the hands-on experience to even just fiddle with it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Last question from Christopher again. He said, where should a motion graphic designer start to transition into the game industry? Video production companies and advertising agencies world is a bit different than the game industry.
UI,
yeah.
Yeah, there are two places. There's always, a few. There's always a shortage of UI artists, VFX artists, and technical artists that are involved with shaders. Also animation programmers, but Caleb's got that on lockdown. So, but seriously, UI, like, especially if you've got some ability on like implementing it and can do a little bit of coding with it and in any way, man, like, every studio is just going to be like, you want to come here because we need you.
Yeah. If you, like, as a motion graphics artist, UI is amazing. There's UI everywhere. There's motion graphics everywhere. And somebody who can think on that level that is designing, there's a very distinct difference. I have a personal game that I play at GTC where now I'm going to seem like a mean person, but I chuckle at people's business cards, because people who are fantastic artists are not great designers. It kills me. The spatial awareness and like design principles that I see, it hurts my heart, but in a way that brings me joy and no judgment. It's contact information. Nobody's going to give me their card this year. But like, being a motion graphics artist, I think there's like a more design sense, like a graphic designy sense there as well as motion. And I think that is a really unique and important skill set to have. And so bringing that to the table, and then those do seem like the kind of motions and things that would be very applicable if you were interested in transitioning into effects. They are the most badass artists on the team. They make the coolest things. Effects are everywhere. And if you were interested in making a serious transition out of that space and into an effects space, that would be awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, you guys are right. UI is everywhere in every single discipline or in every single department. I mean, I'm just thinking of a current thing that I was working on. I mean, we were so hard up for any kind of UI motion graphics artists for this marketing campaigns we were doing. It's just like they need to pretty all that stuff up. So I think that's a good I don't know. It feels like a good place to be if you have some options, Christopher. So, all right, we've gone on for a long time. You guys have been really great, just answering questions and kind of talking about stuff. So, we'll call it here. But any last words before we get out of here?
Animation Exchange, March 20th. Starts at noon Pacific time.
Tea Time Animation Jam, March 17th and 18th. Register at teatimeanimation.com before March 14th to participate. It's free.
All right. And Niels asked me, do you have a battle plan for the animation showdown, and how do you see your chances? Oh my God. If there's a battle plan and it's a matter of how do I see my chances, I'm a solid third place there. So don't expect anything from me.
What was I saying before?
Don't expect anything from me. Yeah, exactly. I'm still working on the self-deprecating part. But,
Jalil's been like CEO of a company for like 2 years, so like you can take him down.
I don't even know if he knows what a keyframe is anymore.
Yeah, he's weak.
Oh my God.
Spreadsheets.
Yeah. We need to do a thing where we're not matched against each other because we'll figure it out. But anyway, I will see both of you soon, and I'll be at GDC. I haven't been there in a while, so for me it'll be kind of like it'll kind of almost be like a first year. Like I'll probably be going up to a lot of people and just like being like, hey, I recognize your face. I feel like I've talked to you before on Twitter or email or something, and I'll be that person. But for anybody else, that's watching or anything, hit me up because I want to try to meet as many people as I can. So
and you're also speaking.
Yes, also giving a little mecha talk on Monday, and still working on it. But so it'll be fun. Yeah.
Great.
All right. Thanks again to both of you. And thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you again soon.